I made $100,000 in purchases in 6 days. If you believe that there's a non-zero chance of a shutdown, don't just snooze and hope it goes away, de-risk. What's up guys, it's Sebastian from Ask Sebi. Today we're going to look at how to survive a financial review by American Express. We'll talk about the causes, your options, and also my experience with all of this 2 times. Big favor before we dive in is to give this a thumbs up to help with the algorithm. That way it shows up and people can see this and kind of avoid these missteps. And if you are new, you want to maximize the spend that you already do to get more points, to do some cool trips, then consider subscribing. Okay, so what is a financial review? This is a process that American Express conducts to check your credit worthiness as well as your financial standing. Some people might never experience one, and that's fine. Other people might experience it every year. So for example, View from the Wing gets a financial review on his business every single year. The idea of the review is that you can service and you can pay off the money that's been lent to you, because when you do use a limit, that is money lent, and also that your credit limits are not unreasonable given your circumstances. Put another way, that you can pay them back and that you're not too risky. If you are a sole prop, financial reviews, at least in my experience, hit both your personal as well as your business cards. Because in this case, your business and you are the same thing, but if you have a separate EIN for the business, so if it's an entity in itself, then that might be a bit different. Okay, so what causes a financial review? There's a few different things that can trigger it, but it might not just be one thing. So you can kind of set off one of these flags, but maybe you have to set off 2 or 3, or set off one very dramatically before they care. For me, I have a theory that mine was a mix of 2, but yeah, let me know your circumstances if it happens to you. One of the causes is a significant increase in your spending. For example, if you normally spend $5,000 a month across all your American Express cards, and suddenly you start spending $50,000. There might be legitimate reasons why you're doing that, especially for business purposes, but it still raises that minor flag. Another pretty major one is going to be missed payments. This could be indicative of your financial situation changing pretty dramatically and maybe your inability to service these loans and moving forwards. Number 3 is related, and it's going to be significant changes to your credit report. For this one, they're generally looking for pretty bad ones, so defaults as well as bankruptcies. The idea being that if you're defaulting on your Chase cards, then your American Express cards are probably next. Number 4 is going to be high risk spending. I would say that this is a minor one compared to everything else, but it can tip you over. For example, if you're buying a lot of cash equivalents or things that can easily be sold. Good examples of this are going to be gold, watches, as well as Apple products. Imagine if someone stole your credit card and they were buying stuff that they could later resell. Those would be the products that would spook American Express. Another one would be spend while you're in Vegas. I'll add a lot more context to this one in a bit because it's what happened to me. One of the last factors is using the check your spending power tool that you see when you log into your account. The idea being that you could use it for bust out purposes to figure out how much you could spend on the card at a maximum before you maybe default. Like with everything else, there are levels to all of this. If you're a new grad and a new card member with them, and you're now testing, let's say $100,000 or $1 million and whether that would go through, that looks pretty questionable. There can be legitimate reasons for this, but it seems pretty suspicious. And I completely get why it's fun, but if you flip the table and you were the bank and someone was out there who just signed up for a card and is seeing how much they can spend and what would get approved, it would spook you too. Okay, this guy says he makes $50,000 a year and he's trying to test out a $100,000 transaction. At the same time, there are levels to this, so if you're a billionaire, then $1 or even $10 million might be within your normal spending pattern. Reminder that these factors by themselves might not necessarily lead to a financial review. It's usually a combination of factors and something tripping up that final flag. For example, your purchasing behavior ramping up dramatically and then you attempting a large charge in Vegas. Also, unsurprisingly, scale does matter. If you normally spend $50 on your Amex cards and now it's $500, that's probably not enough for them to care. I would guess that $500 is within the risk tolerance, and even if that is a write-off, that's pretty minimal. Even $500 to $5,000 a month might be fine, depending on your income and your credit file. I've seen some of you buy engagement rings or maybe get a call from Rolex, they'll call from Rolex, and that's still fine. It might be jumping from $500 or $1,000 to $5,000 or $10,000, but that's not raising enough flags. Main takeaway, for 99% of people, don't be scared to spend on your cards for this reason. If you want to go to Vegas, use your cards, that's fine. If you are doing a big purchase, a few cards to consider. Number 1 is the Hilton Surpass, where you get a free night certificate after spending $15,000 in a calendar year. That's an uncapped certificate, so there's a ton of value, and to me at least, well worth that spend. Number 2 is going to be Delta Status Boost from both the Delta Platinum and Delta Reserve on both the personal and business sides. You do have to value Delta status, but can definitely be useful. Number 3 is going to be for an intro bonus. If you do have a large purchase coming up, then you might as well sign up for a new card and hit the intro bonus and get a ton of value. On that related note, if you do want to learn about American Express cards, or pretty much cards from any other issuers out there, and you want to support the channel, we do have links on the website, asksebby.com, and down below in the description box. As always, make sure that the links are competitive, but otherwise, it is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you guys in advance. Also, if you are new to American Express, I'd recommend going for the Platinum first, given the 150k targeted offer. So that's the best starting point to start off American Express. I'll leave a blog post down below on how you can use Card Match to find that 150k offer. Okay, so how can you tell if you're under financial review? You'll typically notice a few things, and a lot of them are pretty obvious. So number one, your cards are going to be frozen. If you try to charge them, they're just not going to go through. I don't think the cashier or the person on the other end will know the exact reason, but it's just declining. At the same time, if you have it in your mobile wallet, one of the easiest signs is that it'll tell you that your card is no longer working. Their team will also call you to figure out what's going on, to ask about whether you're still getting paid, what your income looks like, and all the other details you would expect. I believe for that they are making notes, so be careful that you're not lying on the call, because if you say something and the information that you have to submit that's verifiable is different, then that's not going to be a good time. Also, when you log into your account, you're going to see charging suspended. Please call this number. They'll also send letters to you documenting this request. Interestingly, even though I have more than 10 cards of American Express, I only ended up getting 3 letters from them. Okay, so let's take a look at the types of documents that they can request. On the personal side, they're looking at your income, as well as whether you're still employed and still make money. On the business end, it's going to be income as well as expenses. They take what you said, the information that you send to them that they can verify, and then they make a decision whether they do nothing and nothing happens, you keep your limits, you keep your cards and everything's fine, they cut your limits to de-risk on their end, or they close their accounts. There are quite a few things they can ask for. They might only want one of them, or they might want all of them. The first one is going to be your verified income via Form 4506T. So this is pretty much a form that gives them permission to go to the IRS and to confirm certain numbers with them. Number 2 is a W-2. Number 3, pay stubs. Number 4, bank statements. Number 5, joint bank statements or other brokerages. For example, maybe you're not personally well off, but you have a spouse that is, or maybe you have a parent that is. The last one is going to be financial statements or income statements, but this is more so for businesses. The documents they request are a function of what they're concerned with. For example, if they think you overstated your income, then it's probably going to be 4506T or your W-2. In that case, if your information is wrong, then they're going to cut your limits. If their main concern is your ability to service your debt and to actually pay off your cards, then it's probably going to be your bank statements as well as your pay stubs. The idea being that you're still employed and that there's money going into your bank account that you can actually pay off your debts. My understanding is that it is a pretty holistic view, so maybe you currently don't have income, but maybe you're retired and you have a gigantic stock portfolio, meaning that you can service your debts. Alright, so I found out that I'm under financial review. I need to submit certain documents. Should I actually do that? If you want to keep your credit cards of American Express, then you do need to submit. Even if you're not sure if the information is going to help you or hurt you, I would still submit, because the worst case is that they reject you and they shut down your accounts. So if you kind of think of it like a decision tree, if you don't submit documents, then your account's getting shut down. If you do submit and the income is different and there's too much of a discrepancy, maybe limits get cut or they get maintained. If you submit and they do not think you can service your debts, then your accounts get closed anyways. Put another way, if you don't submit, then you're opting for the worst outcome. If you are someone that overstated their income, we'll look at an example of exactly that towards the end. Main takeaway, if the risk is getting shut down and blacklisted, you might as well shoot your shot. Okay, I'm facing a financial review. What are the steps to survive? Step number 0, take a breath and breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. This sucks, but it's not the end of the world. There are other issuers out there, and that's also why you want to diversify with those other issuers, especially early on. Chase, Capital One, as well as Citi all have super competitive cards. Step number 1, figure out which documents they need. If you haven't called them yet, then do that first, because otherwise you're not going to move the ball. There's no point submitting A, B, C, and D if they only want B and D. You can submit all of it if you want, but make sure you submit the things that they care about. Step number 2, note the timeline. So you generally have 14 days or 2 weeks to submit this information before they take action. And that action, if you don't do anything, is almost always account closure. And obviously, this can change and might be different in the future, so note whatever they tell you. After you submit your documents, it may take 7 to 10 business days for them to review, verify, and take action. So for me, it took 5 business days. I submitted everything Sunday night or early Monday morning, and then I found out on Friday morning. Step number 3 is to de-risk. If you think there's a non-zero chance of a shutdown, Don't just snooze and hope it goes away and that things are going to be fine. De-risk. Even if it's just 1% of a shutdown, you're better safe than sorry. So in my case, I transferred out a ton of points to Emirates, ANA, and also Singapore. This was a function of the products I wanted to try and also the places I like going to. I did debate adding some Hilton because I think there is a lot of value there and I like Hilton, but I feel like I'm already too overexposed. Make sure you note down any expiration dates for some of these programs because some of them do expire. For example, Emirates miles are only valid for 3 years. Also be careful to not just transfer to a program that sounds familiar and friendly like Delta. I like Delta and I fly Delta when I'm paying out of pocket, but in terms of their points, it's not as powerful as you might think. They're great if you're looking for economy in the same way that Southwest and JetBlue points are great for economy, but they're not great for first and business. The last thing you would want to do is to transfer points out to a program that's not as advantageous as you think it might be. Even if your goal is to fly Delta Business, your best bet is something like Virgin Red. You can also cash out your points if you want to, so especially useful if you have a Schwab Platinum. For this one, I think it really depends on your priorities and your focus in life. Especially if your head is on the chopping block, I would lean towards transferring out to partners because one of the best means for doing that might be closed off in the future for you. So for example, 300,000 points is about $3,300 if you transfer out to Schwab. At the same time, if you transfer over 300,000 points to something like Virgin Red, that might be 2 round-trip business or first-class tickets from the US to Japan for you and your player too. Flights that might otherwise run you $10,000 or $20,000 each. Your mileage may vary, but in my opinion, you can always make more money, but it's hard to get these experiences and especially the points to get these outsized opportunities. Step number 4 is a pretty big one, and it's to decide whether you even want to submit. So if you want to keep your cards, then submit, but there are a lot of people out there that just are not comfortable sending very private information to private companies. A bunch of companies and also countries have my thumbprint as well as Retina already, so I generally don't care, but if you do, probably just move on to a different issuer. Step number 5 is to submit. There are a bunch of instructions that I'm not going to read here. Main one though is to include a cover sheet. And all of this is going to be in the email they send you, so they'll send you a specific link to upload all your information. If you do not include a cover sheet, then they're not going to be able to process it. Step number 5 is to wait and see what happens. Once they make a decision, they'll try to call you and tell you what happened. Later that day, they'll also send you an email explaining their decision. Alright, so what's been my experience of financial reviews and how did I survive 2 of them? The first time was years ago when I opened a Platinum card. I misplayed things and started with it every day, but yeah, I was pretty excited for the Platinum given all the features. I probably was too excited by the no limit feature and was playing with the tool. And that's why I completely get it because I've been in those shoes. When you're getting a card that has technically no limit, you're obviously curious, well, does 25K work? Does 50K work? Does 100K work? Lo and behold, all of those worked and sounded great. The next purchase I tried to do at the Apple store ended up being that final flag, and then my account was frozen. Probably didn't help that I was trying to buy a MacBook in the first week of getting the card. I got a call while at the Apple store and they were questioning how I used the tool and what I was trying to do. It also might not have helped that I got the Prestige card, I think either earlier that week or a week ago or 2 weeks ago, but pretty close. Call me crazy, but I feel like I'm one of the few credit card YouTubers that isn't just telling you to apply for cards, but does so as well themselves. Long story short, I submitted a 4506T, waited a few weeks or what felt like a few weeks, and then everything was fine, but my limits were cut. I think it took about 12 months for them to get rid of that limit, but that's fine. And to be fair, there was a pretty big difference between the stated income and the income from the prior year. At the same time though, I don't think it was really my fault. In the prior year, I was a founder and I had a founder salary. After that business, I joined another company where my income basically 3x'd. This time it was my own fault because I should have known better, but it was just too lucrative. Long story short, I have a cousin that does a lot of secondary market reselling. Something came up that was low margin, but very high liquidity. And no, it's not drugs. Completely legal and relatively low risk in terms of the liquidity side. I made $100,000 in purchases in 6 days. I was paying off the cards pretty much as I was using them, but maybe that also led into a cycling risk. A lot of these were on the hybrid cards such as the Business Platinum, and I was paying it off as I was using it. Crazy enough, this by itself did not get a financial review, but it happened in Vegas. Go back to 2 weeks when we went to Taylor Swift. The Uber from our house to SFO airport, that was fine. Charged on American Express, no problem. From Vegas to Palazzo, that was also fine. Very literally, it's these transactions. So those were fine, but the thing that raised the final flag was when I tried to pay the deposit for the Palazzo with the Platinum card. I already paid the room rate because I booked it through FHR, but yeah, that final deposit payment was what set everything off. Also instantly got a message from Apple Pay saying that my card is no longer working. Got a phone call from American Express questioning pretty much everything. And by all means, I'm not saying that Vegas is going to get your account flagged. I've gone to Vegas a ton of times. I generally go every 2 to 3 months, and I've gone for years without issues. It's because my spending increased so dramatically, and then I think Vegas was just a final push. For all they know, I could have been buying a bunch of highly liquid and then reselling them, and then taking that money to put it all on red. In my case, I had to submit pay stubs as well as my bank account. It took them 5 days to review everything, and there were no actions on my account. Last example is a pretty relatable one, especially if you are a new grad or you're someone that might have gotten a promotion. I find that especially tends to be the case because once your financial position changes and it improves, you generally start to focus on other things, and maybe if you start traveling more, you start to look at travel cards. So in that case, the income that you currently have might be dramatically different than the income last year. Case in point, I've had friends that have gone through PhD programs, and while they're going through the program, they're maybe only making $20,000 or $30,000 a year. It's a good amount for what it is, but generally speaking, it's not as much as they could otherwise make in industry. Once they go into industry, their income explodes. So for example, at Facebook, if you are a PhD grad, you're almost always starting at IC4. Total comp for IC4 is 200 to even upwards of 300. In their case, let's say their total comp was 200K, they get a financial review and they're looking at last year's tax return where you're making maybe 20K. So in that case, should you submit because there's such dramatic difference? A 10x difference is pretty substantial and it could look like you're lying. In their case, they still submitted and it ended up being fine. Despite the 10x difference, they did cut the credit limits across, but they didn't really care about anything else. And even with decreased credit limits, it's not ideal, but there's worse outcomes. Main takeaway, as with travel and pretty much everything else in life, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Again, if you do want to learn about cards, we have links on the website, asksabby.com, down below in the description box. If you made it to this point in the video, leave a map emoji in the comments down below for kind of mapping out this whole process and planning everything, and I'll try to heart it and also respond. My question for you is, what's been your experience with financial reviews, or is it something that you've avoided? Also, if you did get a financial review, would you submit everything or would you ignore it and move to a different issuer? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. Big favor, give this a thumbs up, consider subscribing, but otherwise, hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time.